Hello everyone, and welcome to my tier list of every single previous Cloud9 player, where we'll be ranking them based on how integral they were to the org, their legacy, and how their stories helped shape Cloud9 over the last decade. In terms of rankings, the very top tier is reserved for only one player and will be the player that a majority of fans of any team identify as the most popular and best representation of C9. S to C are players that had good reasons for being on the team and will be ranked on longevity, how good they were for us, and how well they represented the spirit of Cloud9. The last tier are for players that were straight up bad roster moves or actively brought down the image of Cloud9. With all that out of the way, we can move on to the original Cloud9 roster, debuted in 2013 summer, won 2 LCS titles in a row. First up, we got Balls, who will be going into the A tier. Got a penta as Darius at Worlds up against shit on for being Diamond 2. Some of the best Rumble ultis in League history. And overall was just an amazing representation on the team, just kind of lacked the longevity and the outspokenness. In a league where everyone wanted to be known, Balls was more of the quiet type in the background. Next up, we have Teos, who will go straight into the S tier. Pretty much any time you think of Cloud9 and what they were known for in those early days, Teos encapsulates. He's funny, he's a memer, he's incredibly good, and he doesn't seem to take anything too seriously, but he can still perform when it matters. Him and Sneaky were the longest standing members on Cloud9. He's made the finals multiple times, 2 LCS titles, and went to other teams and make the finals. So absolutely an incredible player. I is someone that I bounced around a lot of which ranking to really put him in. However, at the end, I did settle on keeping him in the S tier right behind Teos. He reimagined how the game was played during those first few years he was in the league. He was the team captain. As soon as he left the team, you saw the team have a major identity crisis for a year. And even after he was kicked, he came back and saved the team, and that's just a sign of a true leader and an amazing player for the org. This next one honestly shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. If you ask 1,000 League of Legends fans who's the face of Cloud9, and even today, they'll say Sneaky. Absolutely the face of the org, one of the funniest players in LCS history, has incredible results with 7 Worlds appearances, 5 quarterfinals, 1 semifinals appearance, and the longest career of the original 5. Sneaky has every single quality that a fan expects from a C9 player and will forever be beloved among fans. Lemon Nation truly changed how teams approached everything outside the game, between having coaches, properly preparing picks and bans, and gave us the greatest C9 gift to date. His stint on C9 was cut short, much like Balls, but what he brought to not only C9 but the league as a whole has him solidly at the top of A tier, right ahead of Balls. Jensen was C9's first official roster swap back in 2015 summer after High was replaced. This started off rough as C9 would miss playoffs for the first time and it had to be saved by High. However, Jensen is a player that would get better and better as his career went on. Despite having such a storied career, I do have him in the middle of A tier simply due to how rough the first half of his career started off, especially when it came to clutch moments in big games. If this was Jensen's career as a whole and not just with C9, he would be much higher. Rush was a player that a lot of fans were excited to see, as he was somebody who fit the C9 brand, as he was incredibly funny and in general always looked to have a good time. He did only spend 1 split with C9 and saw the team fizzle out in round 1 of the playoffs before he left. As this list is really only looking at their time on C9, I have Rush down in the C tier. This easily could have gone a lot higher if he just stayed around a little longer. Cloud9 was going through a whole identity crisis, as they were stuck in a situation where if High wasn't in the game, they were hopeless. They attempted to make Bunny Fufu the new shot caller, and this simply failed. I have him down in the absolute lowest tier, as he played around 10 games and just looked terrible outside of Thresh, and immediately left the LCS after being replaced twice in 1 year by Cloud9. Impact was the first roster swap that truly brought Cloud9 to new heights and brought them back to being a contender for the first time in a year. I have Impact at the very top of A tier. An absolute rock in the top lane, he was hands down the best top laner in the league for years. A player that was never fazed by the scale of the moment, and someone I'm truly sad we never gave him a title that he deserved. Smoothie's our first player going right into the B tier. He was a solid player, never below the average, but never really took over the league in a way that a contender needs to. Always good for the brand, but never an all-star player. His saving grace was how solid he was, but his downside was how much he clogged up communication on the team. This next one might come as a surprise, but I actually have contracts all the way up in the S tier right behind High. Remember, this list is based solely on their time with C9. When Contracts joined the team in 2017 spring, he was a fresh rookie, and he dominated the league in regular season as well as playoffs and was one game away from winning the LCS. By the time Worlds came, he was performed exceptionally well, including making top 8 and being one game away from semi-finals at Worlds. He was shown to be fearless against international competition, and I always have fond memories of his time on Cloud9. Ray was another player who not only joined for a short amount of time, but also split time with Impact. While he had some good moments, he simply doesn't have the longevity or the personality to warrant anything higher than C tier right behind Rush. The announcement of Svenskeren joining C9 was met with an insane amount of backlash from the fan base as minds were reeling as to why we would replace Contracts, who we almost made World Semis with, by dropping him for TSM's quote-unquote leftovers. Svenskeren went on to be a very solid member of C9, duoed with Blabber. However, his best time on C9 was 2018 Worlds when he went on an absolute tear and helped bring the team to a top 4 result, as well as he eventually won an MVP award. I do have him at the very top of A tier, as he did have to split a lot of time with Blabber to warrant a spot in the S tier. Licorice had a massive task to replace arguably the best top laner in the league, Impact. While Licorice struggled to keep up with Impact in 2018's LCS due to TL being a powerhouse, Worlds 2018 put his skill and potential on display. Being a part of the 2018 roster and arguably being their best player was such an incredible feat for a first-time player. Licorice remained a staple in C9 up through 2020 when he had the most hot and cold year of any C9 player has ever had. From winning the spring split to being easily the worst player on the team come 2020 summer playoffs, it was rough to watch him look like he simply gave up in the series versus TSM and arguably solo losing that deciding game. While he had some incredible highs, due to how he finished with C9, he was slot right behind Jensen. Golden Blue is arguably the single most out of left field player to have such a big result with C9. Never being a full-time starter, he was more of an ace up the sleeve paired with Svenskeren. He's going to go right into the top of the B tier simply due to the one result he does have. The main and mostly only big moment he had with C9 was replacing Jensen in the 2018 summer playoffs versus TSM while C9 was down 2-1. Being able to come back and win the series was such a monumental achievement for such a discredited player. Beating TSM in the playoffs was something Jensen hadn't even done at this point. This win was mainly huge for fans. It was the first playoff series that C9 won over TSM since 2014 spring. Zeyzal was another player that was a part of the historic 2018 semifinals run. Where he lacks in enchanter supports, he more than makes up for it with his skill and engage supports. While he was eventually replaced due to these gaps, nobody can take away from the fact that he had his role and he did it incredibly well. Even as a rookie, his Alistar play was something that eclipsed even a lot of Eastern supports. Due to his results and how well he represented his org, he'll be going right behind Balls in the A tier. Out of all the previous C9 players, Niski is a player I really wish we had stuck with, as I feel like he had a lot more left to offer. Going into the very top of B tier, while he did win an LCS split, he also struggled heavily at both Worlds and MSI, as well as being a part of the roster that first missed Worlds for C9. I do believe he was a player that improved the more he played, and his attitude was exactly what fans should want in a player. Unfortunately, his results hold him back from being higher in the list. Vulcan is the player that an LCS org dreams of being able to pick up. An NA native, great regionally, great internationally, and a player with a massive personality. Winning 2 LCS titles with C9, being arguably the best support in the league, and really being true to the C9 meme culture made Vulcan a perfect fit for C9 and puts him comfortably in the S tier right behind Hot. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but Perkz for me is going straight down into the lowest tier, just ahead of Bunny Fufu. His goals had nothing to do with improving C9 or NA as a whole. It was clear that since G2 blocked him from certain teams, that he was here just to kill a year before being able to go back, join an LTS team that he wanted. In terms of performance, he was at best a mid-tier player across the entire league, with one of his few dominant games being in Game 5 versus TL, a Game 5 that shouldn't have happened seeing as TL was missing their main jungler. At both MSI and Worlds, he struggled outside of a few games and even told the team right before their quarterfinal match that he was leaving, completely killing the vibe, and then he immediately left back for LEC. Yes, he had some standout games, but he also had a lot more bad ones and wasn't in Cloud9 for the right reasons. Summit and Winsome were the definition of a blip on the radar and an overall failed experiment. Cloud9 looked to build a Korean majority roster with Ellis at the helmet coach, who also had a big say in bringing in Winsome, Summit, and Berserker. While Berserker was incredible, both Winsome and Summit simply didn't mesh well, and C9 flamed out of the spring playoffs and both left shortly after. I would give this move a lot more flack and move both them to the bottom tier if this was summer, but seeing as it was spring, I can accept the experiment and keep them in the very bottom of C tier. Diluc is our last remaining past player, only playing a small chunk of 2023 Spring Split before being replaced by MNS. This, however, was always a known possibility, as C9 specifically brought in both MNS and Diluc, knowing that eventually only one would be chosen as the starter. While C9 won a lot of their early games, Diluc simply wasn't at the rest of the team's level and was replaced. He stays out of the lowest tier simply because it was a partially intended move, and was a smart roster move simply due to MNS having issues of toxicity with previous teams. A huge thank you to everyone that made it to this point. Feel free to like, comment when I'm wrong, and subscribe for future videos. Also, check out my Twitch and Kick. I stream Friday to Monday, and I will see you in the next video.